Welcome to the Dirt on Growing, where we don't just plant seeds, we plant ideas that challenge the norm. I'm your host, Brandon Rust from Full Crop Sciences, and this is the podcast where living soil meets real science. From worm castings to bottled nutrients, microbial inoculants, and chemical pesticides, we're here to question the trends, break down the data, and empower your grow. It's time to think deeper and grow better. What's going on, everybody? Brandon Rust here with another episode of the Dirt on Growing podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about alternatives to pesticides, microbial alternatives to pesticides. So, we'll get this started off here. I wanted to first talk about insect suppression and the suppression of different types of insects using microbes. And the main ones that are like my go-to are these specific microbes. So I'm going to first talk a little bit about Beauveria bassiana. Now, Beauveria bassiana is an entomopathogenic fungi that has a wide variety of target insect pests. And so this particular microorganism is a fungus, and what it does is it has the ability to parasitize insects. And the way that it does that is it produces a metabolite that enables the microorganism to dissolve the exoskeleton of that insect, and then it's able to penetrate into that insect's circulatory system, and it becomes pathogenic. It infects the insect and causes what's called white muscadine disease. So Beauveria bassiana is a really interesting microorganism because it's not just an insect parasite, right? It has a bunch of different modes of metabolism. And Beauveria bassiana is really interesting because not only does it parasitize a wide variety of insects, but also lives as a saprophytic, free-living soil fungus. And as a saprophyte, what it does is it has the ability to decompose and break down organic material to liberate nutrients and minerals. So just like some of the other probiotic microorganisms that you would typically see in soils that are saprophytic, Beauveria bassiana does that as well. Now, it's not just an insect parasitoid. It's not just a saprophytic microorganism, but it also, Beauveria bassiana is also an endophytic fungus. So what'll happen is in the rhizosphere, just like mycorrhizal fungus, it can colonize the root of plants to create a synergistic relationship between that root and the soil profile, where it can help transport nutrients and water, but it also can go all the way into and colonize the xylem of the plant. So that is the parts of the plant that transports nutrients and water. And so what happens is these microorganisms can get into that plant and they can live and procreate in the xylem, and they're producing different types of metabolites that are actually stimulating things like plant defense. So Beauveria bassiana is becoming, it's been around for a really long time. It was discovered a long time ago. It's been used in commercial products for insect control. And it's one of my favorite insect biocontrols. Again, it's a multifunctional product as well, because most people are using this specifically for targeting certain types of insects like root aphids or the bang aphid, white flies, thrips, things like that, caterpillars. However, you get additional benefits. You get all the benefits from the nutrient cycling as a saprophytic organism. You get all of the benefits of it being a root-associated fungi, and all the benefits of it being an endophyte. And so when we're talking about, the benefits that you get, a lot of it has to do with the metabolites that are being produced by this specific organism that allows it to have so many different metabolic traits where it can, again, parasitize insects and live and procreate by colonizing insects and parasitizing them. It can colonize the internal tissues of the plant and feed off carbon from the plant. It can live as a free-living saprophytic microorganism and can live off of decayed organic mineral and the liberation of nutrients from organic material. So it's a very versatile microorganism, and it's one of my favorite types of pest control. So the other microorganism that I immediately go to when I'm thinking about pest prevention and pest control is a bacteria called Bacillus thuringiensis. Now, there are several different types of Bacillus thuringiensis. There's different strains of Bacillus thuringiensis, but commercially, they're usually sectioned into two different species, which is Bacillus thuringiensis israeliensis and Bacillus thuringiensis kerstocki. Now, depending on which type, they target different insects, right? So BT, Bacillus thuringiensis kerstocki, is targeted for worms, things like cutworms, cabbage borer, corn borer, the worms that you would see, let's say, on your tomato plants, like hornworms, right? They are affected by Bacillus thuringiensis. It targets a wide variety of different types of caterpillar and moth species, before they, pupate and turn into either butterflies or moths. And then the other species, the israeliensis, Bacillus thuringiensis israeliensis, is what you would find in something like microbe lift BCM. And that targets mosquitoes and also similar families of insects like fungus gnats. Now, these are the Bacillus thuringiensis. The microbe is producing a bacterial toxin that actually kills these types of insects when they are ingested. And so it's actually the metabolite, which is a bacterial toxin, that is actually affecting these different organisms. When it comes to things like cannabis, budworm can do massive damage where it will chew up your sites. The big problem with the worms there's a couple of things that happens, right? So they're doing mechanical damage to the actual plant itself, but then they're also causing bud rot, botrytis, because what's happening is when they poop inside of that flower, that is a vector, right, for those pathogens, and they can grow in there in those moist conditions. So oftentimes what you'll see bud mold and botrytis form after the mechanical damage and the poop that is produced by these worms. So it's always recommended to find out when your area is most impacted by these types of pests, so that way you know when to start pre-treating, so that way you don't have to outright go to war. But when we're talking about things like GMO corn, for instance, right? So when we talk about BT corn, that BT stands for Bacillus thuringiensis. And what they're doing is they're making it so that corn produces the same types of metabolites as these microbes, so that way they can be immune to attack from things like corn borer. So in my personal arsenal, these are always present. Beauveria bassiana, which is an entomopathogenic fungi, and then Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a bacteria. Another notable fungus is Metatarharzanium anispole, and that is another fungus very similar to Beauveria bassiana. It has a similar target pest range, but the only difference really is the met. It also targets ticks and flies, while the Beauveria bassiana does not. Now, depending on the actual strain of these microorganisms, they will be more pathogenic towards certain types of insects. And I'll give you a good example. Beauveria bassiana strain GHA, which stands for grasshopper active, has been found to be able to treat grasshoppers and leafhoppers much more efficiently than, let's say, another strain of Beauveria bassiana. So it's really important to make sure that you're getting the right strain for the right target pest. So do your due diligence. So those are kind of those are like the main things that I use, and I'm always talking about those particular microorganisms. One, because I use them consistently, and I have been for around 7 years now, maybe even longer than that. But these particular vials, these spores that I sourced from Ting and her family's biotech company, are what I provide to the community. Okay, so I'm going to get into, that was for pests. So those are the main things that I use to target pests. Beauveria bassiana and the Bacillus thuringiensis, one's a fungus, one's a bacteria. They can be used together, right? And what's really awesome is that when you're trying to target, let's say, different types of caterpillars, cutworms, corn borers, when you use BT and the Beauveria bassiana together, you get dual efficacy. So you'll actually see an overall improvement in the efficiency of these microbes when you combine them together. I have also read peer-reviewed science white papers that show that Beauveria bassiana along with trichoderma work really, really efficiently as well. Now, what's interesting is the trichoderma isn't effective as a pest management microbe. It works for pathogens, but not pests. But for whatever reason, when you combine the fungus together, that's for pests, and the fungus that's not, they increase each other's efficacy. And you might be wondering, well, wouldn't the trichoderma outcompete the Beauveria bassiana, or would the Beauveria bassiana outcompete the trichoderma? And the simple answer is not necessarily, right? It can, but that's usually only in conditions where it's limited resources, right? When you have adequate resources, these things function very, very well together. So Bacillus thuringiensis, Beauveria bassiana, Metatarharzanium anispolate, all really good beneficial microorganisms that can be used as alternative to synthetic pesticides, which is what I like to see, because again, synthetic pesticides, they end up downstream in our own bodies. These microbes are ubiquitous to the environment, which means they exist naturally in almost all ecosystems globally, and they have no negative human interactions, right? They're safe for people and pets. Squash and potato beetle can be eradicated with the Beauveria bassiana. Met also works really well. So let's talk a little bit about pathogen suppression, because oftentimes we talk about things to decrease pest pressure, but also we have to keep in mind pathogen pressure. Things like Fusarium, Botrytis, Alternaria, Leaf Septoria, Pythium, Botrytis, I think I mentioned that, powdery mildew. So all of these are caused by microorganisms, but they can also be subdued by microorganisms as well. And so when we're talking about the microorganisms that work best as a pathogen suppression weapon, a biocontrol weapon, trichoderma is my go-to, which is a fungus, and Bacillus subtilis, which is a bacteria. So what's really great about these is, again, multifunctional products, right? Both of these microorganisms are free-living saprophytic microorganisms. So trichoderma, just like the Beauveria bassiana, can live as a free-living soil microorganism that is able to decompose organic material, liberate nutrients. It produces enzymes. It produces organic acids that bind and chelate, and sidiophores that bind and chelate nutrients to keep them in a bioavailable form, right? So it's multifunctional. It works, trichoderma works just like glomus and radices or Rhizophagus irregularis, which is what it is now called. It works like those mycorrhizal, where it actually penetrates into the root and can transport nutrients, phosphorus, and water. Just like Beauveria bassiana can, just like mycos can, so can trichoderma. But trichoderma can go even one step further. Not only does it extend its root network into the soil and increasing the surface area of that root system, which enhances nutrient uptake and bioavailability of nutrients. It increases diffusion, mass flow, and root inception. Right? When you're stimulating the roots to grow and mine, and you're increasing the surface area of those roots because this microorganism is making associations and extending that root system further into the soil, it penetrates into the root cuticle and makes its way into the vascular transport system of the plants. And new science has shown trichoderma and Beauveria bassiana both to colonize the xylem of the plant, the transport mechanisms for the plant to move nutrients and water can be colonized by these microorganisms, which is absolutely insane when you think about it, because like in the soil, well, these things are producing enzymes, organic acids, siderophores, phytohormones, right? They're doing the same thing inside of the actual plant. So it's wild to think that, okay, these microorganisms are living inside of the plant. They're utilizing water and nutrients that are being transported into the xylem so they can procreate and expand, right? And when they're in the plant, they're producing all those same types of metabolites, all of those carbon compounds, all of those phytohormones. So it is stimulating the plant internally, right? Same thing with Bacillus. So these work as endophytes. And the cool thing is, while this is producing the fungal filaments, those fungal hyphae that are extending the plant root zone, this bacteria is actually colonizing the fungal filaments in this. So these things are working synergistically together, and they improve their efficiency together. Now, both of these microbes, they don't just produce phytohormones and organic acids and enzymes, but they're producing antibodies as well. So they produce selective and non-selective metabolites, things like chitinase, right, which will degrade the fungal bodies of other types of microorganisms. And so if there's pathogens present while these things are being produced, it'll suppress those pathogens like Fusarium, right? And so they're also producing target-specific antimicrobial compounds that specifically target pathogens. So those are kind of my go-to things. Again, these microorganisms, they both colonize the phylosphere, they colonize the rhizosphere, they colonize at their free-living soil microorganisms, and they also colonize the xylem of the plant. So they are endophytic. And all of these things, they regulate and stimulate and increase all of these plant metabolic functions, all of the soil nutrient interactions. They're all positively affected by these microorganisms simultaneously while you're outcompeting pathogens and treating or preventing pests. So, this is the wave of the future. This is what more farmers are switching to, are microorganisms that have more benefits multifunctionally across eco-agro systems. So that is my little rant on these microorganisms. I'm going to open this up for questions. I got one right here from Holy Toledo 420. Would I get the Microbe Plus for the pest or the spores? So Microbe Plus is a consortium of different probiotic microorganisms, lactic acid bacteria, fermentive yeast, purple non-sulfur, photosynthetic bacteria. And that is really for overall health and fertility, right? I like to add that every couple of weeks. When I'm targeting pests and pathogens, I always go for the pure spores, right? Because I can target exactly what I'm trying to target. Let's say I'm looking to target cutworms, right? In my outdoor. Beauveria bassiana and BT 100% of the time. Bam, that's what I want, right? So spores are going to be best for specific targeting. And then the Micro Plus is really just general out competition, general increase in soil health and fertility. It helps promote a wide range of other beneficial microorganisms that aren't necessarily associated with that consortium. So that is kind of my spiel on these microbes. All of these are available, trichoderma and bacillus. You can find those on the website. If you're looking for BT, if you're looking for Beauveria bassiana, you can order the trich or the bacillus and leave a note at checkout to swap them out. I have all of them available. So I hope that really helps. You got to really understand the main benefits are really these metabolites that these microbes are producing. You know, chitinase and another enzyme that degrades the exoskeleton of insects that Beauveria bassiana produces. And then the way that it actually colonizes internally the plant and sporulates, right? And it's so interesting that you have a microorganism that can not only protect the plant internally endophytically, but can colonize its roots, and it can colonize and, you know, insects that are just around that plant in that system. Just as a free living soil microorganism, it can capture or it can sporulate, and those spores land on some insect that's just roaming around that maybe hasn't even done anything to the plant yet. Maybe it's looking for food, and it gets parasiticized and it stops that insect in its track. Microorganisms are freaking amazing. All the things that these things do, just as for pest prevention, for, you know, the nutrient dynamics and the interactions with nutrients and interactions with carbon, and how it stimulates, you know, plant defenses, and it upregulates genetic responses, and they produce hormones that the plants respond to. All of these microorganisms do these things while also protecting from pests and pathogens. So anyway, I'm going to end this one for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Make sure you guys go check out bokashiearthworks.net to go tap in with all the spores, microbes, humate fertilizers, and be on the lookout for any new drops. We're going to be doing some soon. So I'll see you guys soon.